And we're going to go into the graphic before I actually start, right? Okay, cool. All right. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, my name is Joseph Gaylord, and I'm part of the team here at the ITU Telecom World Young Innovators Competition. On behalf of the competition, Telecom World, and the ITU, I am thrilled to welcome you to the second Hangout of our 2014 competition. This Hangout is tied to the second challenge of our competition, which is on the use of open source technology for disaster management. I just want to remind you before we get started that you are free to apply until the 31st of July for the second challenge, which is online at ideas.itu.int. The winner of that competition will get up to $10,000 in seed funding, access to our top-level accelerator program, and will come with us to attend the ITU Telecom World Conference in Doha, Qatar this December. For the purpose of this Hangout, I also want to remind you that we are taking questions via hashtag #ITUWorld, both on Twitter and on Facebook, once we reach the open questions section of our event. So we have a fantastic panel lined up for you today, consisting of experts and current participants on the platform. First off, we have Sarah Jane Terp, who is the Director of Data Projects at Ushahidi, one of the organizations that's a leader in this area of open source for disaster management. We also have Linkesh Diwan, who is one of the winners of our 2012 competition and the founder of Crisis Communicator. We have Anna Clements, who is the co-founder of Broad Street Maps and one of the winners of our 2013 competition. And we also have two of our current applicants, Ana Silvia Salazar, who is the co-founder of Edon Rapido, and we have Yasser Siddiqui, who is the founder of RescueBot. Both of them are currently on the platform competing for our second challenge. So before we get started with our questions, I just want to open the floor for everyone to be able to introduce themselves quickly, give you a sense of what they do and why they're able to give us some insight or ask some really interesting questions for this competition, for this Hangout. So we're going to start off with Sarah Jane. If you can just give us a quick understanding of who you are and what you do with Ushahidi and what Ushahidi does.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Terp. I'm the Director of Data Projects at Ushahidi. So Ushahidi is all about empowering people to make impact for their communities by collecting and sharing their stories. So we're known for our work supporting natural disaster responses, but we also support work on election violence, civic improvements, agriculture, and many, many other areas. We have about 70,000 or more deployments of our main software. We also have a new tool, CrisisNet, which is designed to make sense of the streams of data that's now available in the crisis through social media.
All right, fantastic. Second, we have Anna Clements. And if you want to tell us about Broad Street Maps and how you got involved with using open source technology.
Sure. Hi, my name is Anna Clements. I'm one of the co-founders of Broad Street Maps, and we focus on bringing geographic tools and analysis to public health organizations. Mainly, we work in developing countries, and we work with all different kinds of data sets, both global and really local scale data sets, and we try to merge data from all different sources and make it really appropriate for our partner organizations. So fundamentally, Broad Street Maps believes that health is determined by where you live, but we don't think that the quality of care or access to care should be a factor of your location. So what we want to do is help organizations run geographic analysis to determine where the most vulnerable populations are and how they can deliver care to them in a more effective way.
All right, fantastic. So Linkesh, do you want to give us a rundown of your work?
Sure, thanks, Jason. My name is Linkesh. I'm working with the Crisis Communicator, I'm developing a Crisis Communicator, which is a device meant to provide responders and community response members in times of disaster with the network and with a device and a communication management system when networks and when traditional networking and everything is unavailable. So when the internet's off, when the cell phone networks are down, we're building a device that will network with other such devices in the area and provide a communications management system. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say about this right now. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So Anna Silvia, do you want to give us a quick description of Edan Rapido and the application that you put into the competition this time?
Hello, my name is Ana Silvia Salazar. I am 24 years old. I am a computer science engineer from Guatemala. Let me tell you about Edan Rapido. For our project graduation, me and other 4 classmates started our project graduation. The project consisted in development of a platform to CONRED, who is the National Institution to Disaster Management. With this platform, CONRED can report all disasters that occur around the country. The platform consists in a mobile application and a web page. The platform supports text, multimedia, GPS, and reduce the responsive time considerably. The platform was developed using open source technology only, like PhoneGap, JavaScript, jQuery, and JSON. It is a powerful and useful platform, and in Guatemala we don't have a similar platform yet, but there is a high importance for our country and uh, another developing countries, because the population is vulnerable here. So we are working in how to adapt the platform for population and to add more functionalities, and there is Edan Rápido.
All right, fantastic. And Yasser, do you want to take us through a little bit of your work with RescueBot?
Absolutely. Hi everyone, I am Muhammad Yasir Siddiqui. I am a project manager currently working in Saudi Arabia for Telecommunication Consultants India Limited. I am looking after passive optical networks, but my work RescueBot is currently based on one of my earlier presentation. Actually, it was one of my earlier project, which was titled Robotics for Disaster Management. I presented in 2010 for IEEE All India Young Engineers Humanitarian Challenge. This is just a this is just what you can call a spin-off. This RescueBot is basically an aerial survey bot which will have the capability which will have onboard image processing capabilities, and its objective is to provide effective disaster management. What the objective of this project is that this aerial bot will perform a survey in case of emergencies, and this survey will generate hotspots on the maps. This will generate hotspot maps so that the disaster rescue and relief forces, they can dispatch teams accordingly, and the success of saving lives is much higher. That's about it.
Okay, fantastic. So now that we've gone through our introductions, we're ready to move along into the question section of our Hangout. But I just wanted to remind everyone that if you have any questions for our speakers, our participants, or anyone else, please tweet those or send them through Facebook at #ITUWorld, and we'll be happy to answer those live on air. So before we get started, for the edification of the audience and to some extent for me as well, if we can have Sarah Jane just give us a quick description. What is open source technology, and why is it an important aspect of the tech ecosystem today?
Okay, so definition, open source software is code that can be viewed, used, copied, or modified by anybody. So this is part of an open culture. So the idea that says that anything you produce can be better if more people are able to collaborate on it. And open culture covers a whole range of things, including software as an open source, but also data, hardware, and there are some other areas I've completely forgotten what they are. But it doesn't have to be a small thing. Open source software, we have Linux, Android, Python, Ruby, Apache, they're all open source. So, but at the heart of every single open project is this idea of community, the idea of groups of people who care about your code and to help to make it better. So open source doesn't mean free, doesn't mean everybody can do what they want with it. There are some limits to it. For instance, you can't sell open source code. And if you redistribute open source code from somebody else that you've modified, you have to distribute it using exactly the same license as the original code. So that's a rough idea of what open source is. But and this today is about disaster projects. So if you're looking for open source disaster projects, a good place to start on that is HFOS, Humanitarian Free and Open Source Software. Is that a reasonable explanation?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So we'll move over into the beginning of our questions and answers. These are questions that were submitted by our participants earlier. And the first one is, what can open source technology offer to the field? Oh, sorry, these are the two issues, sorry. What can open source technology offer to the field of disaster management, and what are some of the main challenges and opportunities that for businesses that create or use open source technology? So the four questions that we received from our participants are, how can we address the issue of security and intellectual property for these applications? Because the base code is open source and therefore open and available to everyone. Sarah, do you want to start off answering that question?
Please. So there's two parts to that. Security. And there's always this worry that if you open up your software, somebody's going to put a Trojan horse in it. In practice, that doesn't happen. There are some long arguments that security is better in an environment where all your code is visible to a large number of people. And most open source projects, you don't get to just put your code straight into the code base for that open source project. It gets checked over before it goes in. So there's much better checking, I think, on an open source, which leads to better security.
Okay.
Intellectual property. Free software doesn't mean that nobody owns it. All software is owned by somebody. And there's a whole bunch of work, again, on intellectual property. I think some of the other speakers are nodding now, so I'll hand over to them.
Okay, fantastic. Link, did you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. This is a question that I get asked a lot when I meet with these accelerator groups or investors. They always ask me, so how are we going to protect your money, your project, and do you have a patent, and all these questions. And it's something I've been really wondering, okay, since the crisis communicator is essentially an amalgamation of many different projects in varying types of open source, varying licenses and stuff. So how do I patent the whole thing, or how do I protect the whole thing and make sure that Nokia or Microsoft doesn't go and make it instead of me? And I have to say that I haven't found a perfect answer to that question yet. But what I can say is, when you're working with an open source project, I think that the primary, and this comes to another question also about how to commercialize it, the primary push is not about getting everybody to buy your project. It's getting people to use it and getting people to contribute back to it, and again back to the community. And I think that the protection for the project in itself comes out of the people who are using it, and the people who recognize your moral right to exercise the authority of having started or are being the primary maintainer of such a project.
Very cool. And Anna, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we run into this issue all the time, not necessarily with open source software, but with open data. Mainly, we're really concerned because we're oftentimes working with sensitive health data, so thinking through the processes of how do we make sure that that data is protected and secure when the organizations that we work with work oftentimes with local populations who are dealing with HIV and AIDS or malnutrition or some of these other stigmatized diseases. So really thinking through what's the best process for making sure that that data is secure.
Okay, fantastic. So we have those kind of two sides of it where, it is an imperfect system, but having that community behind it seems to be a really strong aspect of protection, and having people that are caring about your code or working with it seems to be a really strong element of keeping your product safe when you're working with something open source. So I guess the next question, and we have three absolutely perfect people to talk about this. What are some of the open source emergency management systems that are currently being used, and where and how are they being implemented, and what kinds of projects are being done out there? So can we start? I guess we'll work in the reverse order. Can we start with Anna?
Yeah, so we don't specifically work in disaster response. We work more with organizations that are working on health issues pre-disaster. So we really try to build up the geographic infrastructure around mostly working with health systems before disaster hits, so that then we think that people are more ready to respond if and when a disaster does occur. But I would be we always point to Ushahidi as a great example of how open source emergency management response as being the leading tool out there. So I would love to hear your response.
I suppose that's a great segue, and it kind of takes Sarah's easy answer off of the table. So Sarah, do you want to run us through some of the other projects that are out there working with open source technology for disaster management?
Yeah, I figured we'd already have mentioned Ushahidi by then. But yes, Ushahidi is used a lot in disasters. But there are other software that gets used a lot. In terms of the responders using software, Sahana Eden from the Sahana Foundation gets used a lot. It's a management software, essentially for managing the resources, people, shelters, whatever, that are needed in a disaster, to needed to respond to disaster. You also get a lot of reuse of open source software that isn't specific to disaster. For example, OpenStreetMap. I've been working disasters since 2010, and the most significant thing in 2010 was the OpenStreetMap crews who built maps of the roads that responders suddenly went from having no maps to be able to see where they were. So situating people is big. You're also getting a lot of reuse of open source code by some of the very big agencies. For instance, the UN is now using the CCAN software, the repository management software, for its disaster responses, and contributing back to it, which is really closing the loop. The big problem for disaster response up to this point has been stovepiping, that each disaster response agency had its own software, and they didn't speak to each other. You're using open source, and they're starting to use more the same pieces of open source. They've instantly got a way to start communicating with each other, which can only be good. So that was a slightly long answer, so over to the next person.
No, that was fantastic. Link, do you have any thoughts on some of the technologies that maybe you said you have a wide range that you work with crisis communicators, so there may be some that you have in mind?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I was also looking very forward to Sarah's response. She's really in the industry. So, yeah, everything that she mentioned, and also on the more obscure side, amateur radio has a lot of software that while not necessarily identified as open source, such as the automatic packet reporting system, it is in essence open source and has been, I don't know how it's exactly licensed, but I know that it's available for you to use and to contribute to. I'm with the Crisis Communicator. The Crisis Communicator is also open source. We are operating under a open source license called the Peace OSL, Peaceful Open Source License, which is essentially the BSD license, and with an additional clause that says that it cannot be used for harmful activities. So, providing a way for military to use it without killing people. And the Crisis Communicator also piggybacks on APRS. So there are a number of technologies out there, and all it takes is a Google search to find them. But as Sarah mentioned, the key is to get different agencies to speak the same language. And that's part of what the Crisis Communicator is about, to bring community responders and disaster responders on the same platform so they can share the same messages and see the same information. Thanks.
Fantastic. So we have a good idea of kind of the ecosystem that we're working with in terms of open source disaster management. I also want to mention Sarah brought up Sahana, and actually we just were speaking with Michael Howden, who's the CEO of the Sahana Software Foundation, and he's agreed to be one part of our selection committee for the second challenge. So he's going to be bringing some of his insights and helping to improve and work with the ideas that we have on the platform. So that's a nice little announcement that we get to make right here on the Hangout. So the next question that we have coming up is one that's certainly broadly applicable across a lot of the work that we do here, and one that I think comes up a lot when our winners are thinking about how they're going to go forward. And the question is, what is the best way to convert a social project into a profitable business? How do you, to use the term that you hear a lot, do good while doing well, right? Do good in the world while doing well in business. And thoughts on that? I guess we'll start off with Sarah this time.
I had a feeling you might. One part of my job is the external customers work. So this is how Ushahidi makes money. So looking at, I also teach social coding for good over at Columbia. So part of the course there is how do you make money off this? How do you make this sustainable? It's not dirty to make money. It is bad to build a beautiful product and then have it fail because you can't keep it running. So ways you can make money. Consultancy, always a good way. And training. Training comes under consultancy. Hosting sites for people. You can host sites for people who can't necessarily manage them themselves. So hosting maintenance. White labeling. Quite often you have large organizations who need software like yours. And if it works in a disaster, it'll pretty much work for anywhere. But they need it branded as their own. And they'll need tweaks, twerks, things doing to it to make it work in their environment. So you can charge for the effort to do that. And freemium. If you've got software that's open source that doesn't equate to a site that you're running. Remember, these are communities. So again, with the question of, how do you protect this thing? One way you protect this thing is to get a good following. So you're looking at freemium as a possible way of making money from that. You don't have to be a non-profit. There's a trend coming through for social good for-profits, which is quite interesting to watch. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily have to be a poverty-stricken non-profit either. For example, NFL makes billions of dollars, but is a non-profit. So there's room. I mean, the big thing is you have to make yourself sustainable. If you believe that much that this thing should happen, you have to make sure it keeps happening, even after your first grant runs out.
Well, fantastic. That's a really kind of great insight coming in there. Link, do you have any thoughts about turning something that's social good into a solid business?
Actually, I was really happy to hear Sarah's response, because this is a question that we're still working with here. And I was very interested to hear the number of things that you enumerated, and also surprised to note that a few of the things we're actually trying. So one of the things that we're trying with the Crisis Communicator is to be a consultancy that will provide training for disaster response communities or community response teams, and also provide the hardware, if they should want it, uh, or the software they can get, and provide them training on how to use the software and the hardware, so that they will be equipped to respond to disasters on their own. And at the same time, to provide the software and the hardware as a service to NGOs, so that when a disaster should happen, the two sides, the community, the response that grows right out of the area, can communicate and have equal footing with the outside response that comes in. And yeah, so service provision and white labeling is something I hadn't thought of. Uh, we haven't looked into other avenues yet, uh, but that's definitely, I think Sarah's answer was very comprehensive and very helpful for me. Thanks.
Fantastic. And Anna, do you have any thoughts on what you're doing as far as Broad Street Maps in terms of making your business into something that's both socially positive and profitable?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for asking this question and for both of your responses, because this is something that we're currently struggling with, trying to figure out how to make money while still ensuring that we're having a positive impact in the places that we're working. And for the past 2 years, we've really focused on that consultancy model and trying to make money that way. But actually, so we've worked with approximately 10 partner organizations, and have found over the course of the past 2 years that a lot of doing the consultancy, that there's a lot of replication and a lot of steps that are repeated again and again. So then we're trying to figure out what are the most valuable pieces of all of the individual projects that we've done, and trying to pull those out, and then hopefully build a technology, whether it's a platform or a toolkit, that could be scaled and then brought to a variety of different partner organizations. And Sarah, as you said, we've been playing around with a freemium model, or trying to figure out how to hold on to that special sauce, is what we call it, of what we do, and how to try to make a little bit of profit on our sort of special, like what can we bring to all of our different partner organizations. So yeah, it's something that I think any startup, especially people in the social entrepreneurship space, have to deal with all the time. But yeah, going back to something that we talk about all the time is when you first have a project and you're thinking about turning it into a scalable business model, is first just thinking about testing your idea quickly and being able to iterate on those ideas. So really, getting out into your target population, doing as many pilot projects as possible, and really evaluating those projects thoroughly, so that you're having the greatest impact in those communities, and really addressing the needs of the people that you're trying to serve.
Fantastic. And actually, that point really leverages nicely into the next question, which is also one that we run into a lot as a organization that works with a lot of startups throughout various parts of the world, some better connected than others, and so on. The question is that given that many developing countries don't have a strong culture of technology and aren't used to having technological solutions to some of their problems, how does one introduce a digital system of disaster management like the ones that we're talking about in a community that may not have the level of reliance or interest in technology that some other places do? Do you have any thoughts on that? Let's start with Link this time.
Well, thanks for the question. Actually, this is something that is very important, and I've been talking with, well, thanks to the ITU, I've met up with people in Vanuatu who are dealing with this same question. Uh, and they are trying to create community emergency response committees, and they're dealing with the problems of semi-literacy and technological, a very vast technological bridge gap that they have to bridge. So it's a question that really needs to be answered. And while I can't say that I have a proven answer to it, what I can say is that I'm working on a PhD proposal, and I've gotten admitted to the University of Tasmania to start next year researching the same question. So maybe I can tell you something in a few years. But so yeah, the plan was that this would go directly into the crisis communicator and enable me to streamline the device and push it forward towards the communities. And I really don't have a proven answer to say, but I imagine that the best way to get community involvement with disaster response would be to provide a technological tool that is both easy to use and comprehensive. And today, with the mapping technology and the internet technology that we have, the browsers and the ability to build a myriad of different interfaces, I think we definitely have the tools in hand to build in simple interface to these highly complex systems, such as disaster response systems. Thanks.
Let's yeah, as I said, with something that we run into a lot, and I'm really hoping that Link can come back and give us some more insights later on. All right, Anna, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure, yeah, it's something that we think about all the time. I think the most important thing is just making sure that you're using appropriate technology, whatever that is, whether it is still feature phones, or if communities do have access to smartphones, then making sure you make the most of that. But what we try to rely on all the time is thinking through those principles of human-centric design, and thinking about who really is going to be the end user in any situation, and making sure, as I said, that we're testing the use cases in the field, and then making changes on whether it's technology or processes based on who that user is.
Fantastic. And Sarah, given the breadth of different situations that Ushahidi has had to adapt its technology to, I'm sure you have some interesting thoughts as far as how to get the acceptability factor up for different communities.
Well, the original Ushahidi used SMS as an input. We still have that. And we're looking at things like SMS for sensor data right now. So when you said there was no culture of technology in developing countries, there is this culture of technology in many developing countries. It's just a different culture. You can't go designing for PCs when people have mobile phones. So as Anna said, it has to be appropriate to the technology people have. So yes, there's a lot of mobile. In fact, the biggest problems, really, for any technology-based solution in a developing country are connectivity and power. It's very hard to stay connected if the power keeps going down. It's very hard to stay connected in a space where, one of the countries I worked in, people carried up to 5 SIM cards with them, because as they moved across the city, they ran out of one transmitter's range and into another one, and they just switched SIM cards. So there's a piece of technology being built by Ushahidi called the brick, piece of hardware, to do that swapping automatically and to keep power and connectivity going. So that might be interesting to you guys, crisis comms. But there are some places where there genuinely is no technology. Also, this is Nigeria. Also in Nigeria, we worked in a situation where we were working with police, and they had no technology at all available to them. And quite often you find that people have paper systems, and you have to adapt and build that paper into your system. So, for instance, getting people to put markers on a map, getting people to write in a roster, getting people to put pictures if you have to, if there's a literacy problem. Also, sometimes there's fear of technology. So some places, again, I'm thinking some of the instances in places like Sudan, where if you walked in holding a mobile phone or a recorder, you became official. That became a thing to worry about. But if you walked in with a pad of paper and a paper map, it was less frightening. And there are some really lovely paper to technology solutions out there. For instance, public laboratory use a completely blue map, so that any black markings you make on it, you can scan in. OpenStreetMaps has a map format where they have a QR code, and the corners are within that QR code, the map. So again, you can scan and normalize to the existing maps. I've probably gone a little bit too far into using paper as a technology solution there, but that you use what's available. As Anna said, you use what's available.
No, I think that's a really excellent insight, and you know, it's something that we do run into ourselves when we're trying to judge the feasibility of some of the business solutions that we run into, where we have to talk about, you know, in the country where this is coming from, can this be done? Can this be accomplished necessarily in that environment? And it's one of the big discussions that we have on a regular basis as far as the level of technology that we're dealing with. So it's one of those challenges that I think is not going to go away. You're always going to have those digital divides out there, and you're going to have to figure out where on that those different divisions you're working with. But it's good to see that the adaptability is there, and that there are some of the tools in order to work around those issues. So now we have come to the end of the fixed questions. I'm wondering if we have any reactions from Anna Sylvia or Yasser as far as the discussion so far. Anna Sylvia, do you have any thoughts so far?
Yes, Joe, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's quickly. What has been your experience with the bug fixes in open source for the experts?
The book is Fixes in Open Source. Has anyone run into this, and have they worked with it?
Well, the support and consulting.
Can I respond?
Yep.
So during the crisis communicator development, we have been using the online GitHub system. So we've been hosting our code in GitHub, and we've had people fixing bugs and contributing from 3 or 4 different countries. So bug fixes, they do happen, bugs happen, and the bigger the community, I think, the faster things will get fixed and found and fixed. But when you're starting out, as in the crisis communicator, it's hard to really generate a lot of push around it. So I think I don't know the theory. I haven't been able to observe a lot of projects going from 0 contributors to a zillion. But I think there's probably a little bit of a gap there between where you're trying to get more people involved and you really are struggling for people. But I think that the bug fixes, yeah, they do happen, and they do get fixed. It's just a matter of time and getting publicity.
Okay, great. Again, that community aspect that we were talking about. Did anyone else have any thoughts on bug fixes and kind of getting that process working with open source technology?
Well, there are actually 2 parts to this. One is bug finding, and another is bug fixing. So when Ushahidi releases, they have a day where people go and look for bugs. And then the team behind, the dev teams, then go and start working on those bugs. That's quite a nice thing, because you have a set time and a momentum that goes with it. You know when you're going to be looking. You can come and help. There are also some things we've just been looking at where there are paid for bug fixes out there. It's like $5 to fix this big bug of ours. I'm not sure how well that would work. We haven't tried it. But again, it's an interesting development coming through.
Fantastic. And Anna, do you have any thoughts about bug fixing for open source tech?
No, I mean, I think it's just, yeah, again, going back to that idea of facilitating community and encouraging collaboration across all the different open source technologies out there. And I don't think it's happening as much as it should, but hopefully, as Sarah Jane mentioned in the beginning, that it's happening more and more, and I think that that collaboration will help fix bugs more quickly and efficiently.
Cool. Yasser, did you have another question to add to the conversation?
Yes, I have a very minor question. There are some places where there is absolutely no connectivity. Basically, you can have some parts of the countries which are isolated. So we as a telecommunication company, we have an experience of working in rebuilding infrastructure of those countries. For example, Sierra Leone, which was strife with civil war like that. So how do these countries, or does any one of you have any experience of working in such countries? How to integrate these open source technologies in these countries?
I have a little of experience in working with areas without communications. When Pakistan flooded that was back 2010 as well.
Yes.
The north of the country had no communications, except it did. It had ham radio operators. And since then, the people have worked on programs to run data over ham radio links. So you could use the software at one end, run it over the link, and back to the other. So this point-to-point is important. Again, things like the brick will start opening up, and some of the satellite clouds that are coming through will start opening up more communication in areas where there previously wasn't. A slightly more worrying thing is countries like Ethiopia that are deliberately, the governments are deliberately restricting the communications channels available to their citizens. So that's one you may not have thought of. No communications is going to become rarer. Government interference in communications channels, possibly less so.
Fantastic. It's that kind of, unless the direct obstruction is there, it's that idea of there's always a workaround, and there's always something there that can be worked with, and finding and identifying those tools.
I had a bit of a tidbit to add to that. So in Sweden, where I've been, they have a very, very developed telecommunications infrastructure. But when I was talking to people there about the crisis communicator, which is designed specifically for places where, like in Pakistan, the flooding took out the infrastructure. In the Asian tsunami, the flooding again took out the infrastructure. In those situations, even in Sweden, they have places in the north part of the country where the only communications is cell phone towers, and the people, government representatives have told me that they are feeling quite uneasy about this, because if anything should happen, especially in a place like Sweden, if the network should go down, the entire government will come to a halt, because everything is based on the internet. That's how they've expressed it to me. So it's not only a issue that's faced by places with the poor communications infrastructure or none, but also by places with too much infrastructure, too much communication, too much IT proliferation, where they no longer have a backup.
That's actually a very interesting point, especially when you're dealing with disaster management, where there might be situations where those tools that people are really relying on break down. Anna, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's mostly about in the areas where there is no connectivity yet, about developing that infrastructure so that when it does happen, everything is in place to then build upon that. So, but what we do if we're working in areas with little to no connectivity is we use satellite-based handheld GPSs, and then pen and paper to do our geographic data collection and other survey collection. So yeah, it's it's not the most efficient system, but But again, it's what's appropriate, and it's developing that infrastructure so that later you can come in and if you have the base data, then build upon that.
It's actually great, again, that you mentioned the fact that building up the infrastructure is the best way to kind of deal with the problem of connectivity. That's one of the big projects that we do work on here at the ITU, so it's great to be able to say that that's one of our big pushes is toward getting more and more robust connectivity across the world and making sure that more and more of the world is connected better and better. So I guess I'll take my chance to ask a question if nobody else has a pressing thought at the moment. This is something that came up in our discussions. Is it better to use an existing platform for when you're dealing with open source technology, or is it better to start with one from the ground up and set it as an open source project? And what do you think is the best direction to go in when you're dealing with this kind of effort of open source technology for disaster management? Sarah, do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, I was just desperate trying to mute myself. There's a saying by Gisli Olafsson that a disaster is no time to be giving out business cards. If you're building during a disaster, use existing equipment. Use what people are used to, use what they're already familiar with. If you're building ahead of a disaster, then it depends. If it's existing open source and there's an easy leap from what already exists to what you need, then be part of the community, be a good neighbor. Go build on theirs, improve theirs as well. If it's something that you can't adapt out of something else, then by all means build something new. But try to not repeat what's already been done. We see a lot of repeated projects. Build something that's needed from things that you have. It's rare that you need to build something completely from scratch.
That's a fantastic point, and definitely some good advice as far as the current participants on our platform and widely throughout the community of the people working with the Young Innovators competition on this challenge. So do we have any thoughts from Link? Link, I thought I saw your hand going up for a second. I was about to turn that over to you guys.
Sorry. Yeah, so with the crisis communicator, we originally planned to base it off of Sahana Eden. Sahana, the software, which is basically a toolkit to easily create a database. And at the time, they didn't have some key features that we needed, and we looked into the code and we found it to be highly developed beyond what we could easily adapt to what we needed. So we had to go ahead and start our own code. Now Sahana Eden does have some features that we are duplicating. However, I think we've diverged in functionality from theirs. So it does become a question of, well, are we reinventing the wheel, or are we doing something which is very different? And so far the answer has been we're doing something which is very different. So I think we're still on the right track in developing our own. But yeah, at the same time, as Sarah said, it's important to use what is available. And in the development of the crisis communicator, we've tried to pull in OpenStreetMaps and pull in amateur radio technology and use components that are already available, and where necessary, build a little bit of a plug-in to that technology so that it increases the cooperativeness and the compatibility with other technologies. So that we have, because that's one thing, I mean, you look at open source, even OpenOffice, it's the only Office suite out there, well, with the exception of other OpenOffice suites, that reads the file formats from Microsoft and from Lotus and from, it's the only one that combines everything into one whole. And it's the same with all open source projects. There's a huge emphasis on compatibility, which is missing from the proprietary section. And I think that in times of disaster, it's not a question, as Sarah said, of handing out business cards. It's also compatibility and cooperation are key to a successful response. And that's where open source will really shine.
Very cool. Anna, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's not only an issue in disaster management, but also in all sectors of development. I think that the organizations that we partner with are overwhelmed by the amount of open source technology and tools and mobile data kits that are out there and open and available for them to use. And I think that it's distracting and also harmful to have so many different competing options out there. And I think that if the groups that are building the tools were able to do a little bit more collaboration, that we would come up with something really powerful and effective and useful. And I know that there should be different tools for different contexts, but I think a lot of times there's just a lot of unnecessary duplication out there among the tools, and that that again, like Sarah Jane and like Link was saying, that if there was more collaboration and recognizing that if the base code is there and really useful, that there are ways to evaluate and just add some plugins or other useful features that could really make an impact.
Okay. So do we have any other questions from either Yasser or Ana Silvia? Yasser, did you have another question?
Not necessarily a question. It was just an inquiry from Linkesh. Just I wanted to inquire whether their crisis communicator is based upon an open source software, or if they're working on a separate piece of hardware where they are looking forward for alternate means of communication in case of a disaster. So maybe they will have to have some alternate hardware. Just an inquiry. That's it.
Okay, thanks for your question. The crisis communicator is, as you said, yeah, it's necessary to have both the hardware and the software a combined solution for when the networks are down and where there is no infrastructure. Luckily, there's been in the beginning I was thinking to develop my own hardware as well, but as I was searching for alternatives and finding and pulling together parts and ordering pieces and getting schematics from open source hardware projects, I found a Kickstarter project which has been successfully kickstarted and is now in the process of producing their first prototype, called the Earl tablet, which is 99% what the hardware that I was looking for. So instead of reinventing the wheel again, I decided to base off of their hardware. And the people doing that project are pretty cool guys, and they're also they're not open source fanatics or anything. Their hardware is definitely proprietary, but I believe that we can work with them. And in addition, the crisis communicator as a software package is something that can be run on a PC or on a tablet if you have the right hardware, which is essentially a radio, a screen, and a person to operate it. So we're not limiting ourselves to one particular hardware package. If an amateur radio operator wants to use our package on their own rig, they're very welcome to do so. If somebody wants to develop their own thing using the Raspberry Pi, which was our original target hardware, they're also very welcome to do so. So I hope that answers your question. I wanted to ask a question to both Yasser and, well, particularly to Yasser, but also to Ana Silva. Could you explain what sort of open source packages you guys are using? I know Ana Silva touched on it a little bit, but I didn't quite get the full picture.
Hello. Yes, absolutely. I'd like to point out that I will be using a Dragon board as the base for my project, and the DSP will be the Dragon board will be running stock Android OS, and on the Android I'll be using this OpenCV for image processing, so that this Dragon board will give me some RS-232 ports, so that I can have hardware to build upon. And the software base, already we have Android phones working already on Dragon boards, but you have Qualcomm processors. So I think this will be a better way to proceed.
Cool. And Anna Sylvia, you want to say what open source tech you're interacting with and how that becomes part of your project? Anna Sylvia, I think you're still on mute right now.
Joseph?
Okay, there we are.
Can you hear me? Yes. The tools open source we are using.
Yes.
Or yes. We are using Funga and JSON. There is open source platforms to develop mobile applications.
Okay. So I guess, well, Anna Sylvia, do you have one last question before we close?
No, just I wanted to congratulate Sarah because you Ushahidi. I don't want to pronounce it. Ushahidi platform is amazing. We studied it in college, and we are impressed with the functionality, and it's a great platform.
Fantastic. And of course, we're very happy to have Ushahidi on board as well. So if we can now move off to the last thoughts by everybody in the group. I suppose that we'll start with Yasser and Anna Sylvia, and then we'll work in the reverse order that we did with the introductions. So Yasser, do you have any final thoughts before we close?
Absolutely. I don't have exactly, you can call this thoughts, but I'm really happy to see so many people working out, especially Shahidi, working towards better world. Really, I wasn't that much into this field before, but actually I just got to know so much from you guys. It's nice to have a discussion about open source technologies and how other people are affecting this field of disaster management. So nice to have a discussion.
Fantastic. Anna Sylvia, your last thoughts?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope our project is liking you.
All right, fantastic. Linkesh, last thoughts?
Yes, thank you. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the ITU for really having this focus on open source and disaster management and disaster response. I think it's really important, and it's really somewhere that the technology is maturing, and that's the way that we can use technology to really help the planet, which is the purpose of the tools that we develop as a civilization. I also want to thank Sylvia, echoing Anna Silva's thoughts. I want to thank Sarah for the Ushahidi project, and the Ushahidi project and the Sahana project have really been very big inspirations for my own project, and I really am very interested in seeing them go forward, and also seeing how the crisis communicator could share information with the Ushahidi project. Also, thanks to Anna Silva and to Gasser for being here. I hope you guys are successful in your applications, and Jason and Dimitrina for organizing this. I just want to reiterate that I think it's really great that the ITU is taking this focus. Thanks.
Thank you for helping us out with this effort and participating in it. Anna, your thoughts, closing statements?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to the ITU, for Joseph for moderating this Hangout, and for everybody who was participating. I'm looking forward. I'm so happy that we got to start this conversation about open source technology and disaster management here on this Hangout, but also looking forward to continuing the conversation and hopefully all collaborating together, because that's really what it's all about. And hopefully, Anna Sylvia and Yasser, good luck on your projects, and looking forward to Doha.
All right, fantastic. And Sarah, last thoughts from you?
Well, thank you for the thank yous, but those are really going to our community. It's wonderful to see new ideas and new people coming into this field, and wonderful to hear you talk about your communities, not just your code. And Anna Silva, Yasser, good luck. I hope you do well. Thank you.
All right. And thank you to everyone who's been with us today. It's been a really fantastic conversation. I want to reiterate that the platform is open for submissions. So if you felt inspired by our conversation today, or if you're already a part of a startup that's working on open source technology for disaster management, we really encourage you to go to ideas.itu.int and send us your ideas. Our competition has the possibility to bring you with us to Telecom World in Doha, and it's a wonderful thing to have so many people who are so involved and engaged with, as you said, technology that can really make a big difference in the world. So thank you to Sarah, Link, Yasser, Anna, and Anna Sylvia for being with us today and for giving us your thoughts. And thank you to all of you for watching and being so involved. And we'll be happy to talk to you again at the next one of these Hangouts. And keep an eye on our Facebook page and our website for more information as we go forward. And have a good day. Thank you.